What I want to say is welcome to Intro to Music Production, day 2 for all of you that have come back. My hat is off to you. You were the ones unafraid. Even if you struggled downloading some of the stuff and getting it installed, you know what? There's growing pains with this stuff. You got to give yourself a little bit of grace. You're the ones that came back. You're here now. That means you want to continue to try to fight and learn. And we're going to go deeper today. So if you're confused already, get ready to be even more confused. But even in the end, we will sort it all out and you will grow and you will have some wins and you will thank yourself for showing back up. If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. So let's go forward. Begin with introductions. If you weren't here yesterday, my name is Caleb Lovelace. I'm Director of Education for Mastering.com. We have Mr. Jake Codeweiss, one of the mentors, the great mentors over in our reverse engineer program, which is for intermediate to advanced engineers and producers. We have Michael Gilbride. I almost called you Milkle because I'm hungry. No,
Writing that
Michael
down.
Gilbride. He's the general manager. He's the reason you're all here. He's sending out the emails and texts, incessantly reminding you to come to this webinar.
Don't complain.
Better yourself. Yeah,
Please don't.
We're just trying to help.
Just trying to help.
And then Rob Mazes. He's been doing this a long time. He's the CEO of Mastering.com. He's been educating online for as long as anybody. Glad to have him here today, too. I'm glad you're all here.
And yes, I am getting hairstyling advice from Warren.
Right. Yesterday, we left off talking about how we've pioneered a new way to train engineers and producers. We talked about how the normal process for creating music is like writing a song, having it produced, getting it mixed, and then mastering. But that's not the best way to learn this stuff. The best way to learn it, we've found, having done this for 10 years plus and just training thousands of students, what we learned is the value of starting at the end of the process and working backwards is very valuable to most people. And in our education platforms, we start with mastering, we go to mixing, we go to production. So if we're working on, whether you're a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced student, we're going to do it the same. And this is an attempt to kind of showcase what that process looks like and what the value of that is. And today we're going to dive deeper into exactly these processes. And in fact, we are going to master and mix today. And by the end of today, by tomorrow, you will have two. And that'll be pretty cool. Maybe some of you have never done that before. And you start to hear and feel the power of understanding what an end product is supposed to sound like and what that vision of the end in mind can do to the rest of the process. Now, there's only so much we can really hone in on this in 3 days. In our education programs, obviously, we have a chance to go much deeper on this, but it should give you a taste. And ultimately, what I want you to take away from all of this is what? Not perfection. You're not going to be able to learn everything in 3 days, but have a mindset for learning going forward so that you can focus on the important things. And that's what I want to talk about right now is what are the important things? If you ever felt a bit kind of overwhelmed by getting into all of this, if you felt overwhelmed by the different voices you hear in the industry trying to tell you a bunch of different stuff, I want to cut through all of that right now and give you a ton of clarity on exactly how to move forward with your progress as a beginner. First off, I want to talk about mindset, and I want to separate clarity from confusion.
This is great. I love this slide.
There's a lot of voices you're going to hear, and I want to talk about the ones you need to ignore, and I want to talk about the ones you need to listen to. So the voices of confusion you'll hear, some come from you. The first one on that list is you, imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's, and you pretty much never stop feeling this way, I guess, in a lot of ways. Even some days I still feel like an imposter. It's this voice of insecurity. Are you good enough? Do you, are you worthy enough of this? Have you worked hard enough? It's a voice that can hold us back. And I think there's a lot of fear that can creep into our mind. Maybe I'm not creative enough. Maybe no one wants to hear my ideas. Maybe no one cares about the music I'm going to create. There's all these fear voices that will come. And if you let those fear voices run the show, it's easy to give up on stuff, even stuff you really care about. We have to overcome fear. We have to take control of our lives and do the things we want to do, regardless of what those fear voices will tell us. Some people feel overwhelmed by technology. I'm sure some of you are feeling that. Some of you who ran into roadblocks with downloading things or setting up an interface or setting up your DAW, that's okay. Um, we'll talk about the answer to that, but it's a voice that causes a lot of people to give up. I want to encourage you not to give up if you're feeling that way. Just keep pushing forward. We'll help you. We'll figure it out. In a bigger picture sense, I want to talk about a voice of confusion brought on by a lot of people in this industry, the old timers, a lot of times, who say you need a bunch of expensive gear to do this. You'll hear this, I promise. There are forums and websites online that have a bunch of, I would say, pretentious information in it, that you need a bunch of, outboard gear and world-class stuff to make great music. It's not true. Billie Eilish and Phineas, her brother, made great album in their bedroom using basic tools, and they won 7 Grammys on it. It's all about your mind, and it's all about your work ethic and your ability to understand the tools. So don't be led astray thinking that the reason why you're not getting to where you want to go is because of gear that you're not buying. That's never going to be true. I promise you. Save the
My
money, double down on the work ethic, double down on the mindset.
my most streamed song was recorded on a $90 microphone, and my least streamed song was recorded at like the best studio in New York City. So it's all what you do with it.
There you go. Another voice of confusion, and this one may need some explaining, but it's the voice that says it's easy. A lot of times when you get on YouTube, what do you see? Videos that say stuff like, you do these 5 tips and it will change everything. Do this 3 things and you'll have the greatest mix and have a Grammy and whatever. There are a lot of people out there that are selling you something. There's a lot of people out there that need a quick hit. They need a fancy title. They need to sell the next plugin, and they're going to tell you it's easy. Just do this. That's never true. Like any skill you'd want to learn, if you wanted to learn photography or film or painting or any other, and even non-artistic mediums, it's hard work. There's no way around that. It's not easy, though we can make it easier by focusing on the right things. We'll talk about that in a minute. But know that with anything, it's always going to be work, and that's okay. Push through, have good work ethic, be willing to learn this stuff, be willing to work harder than other people, and then have the results that most people miss out on because they're not willing to do it. And that kind of leads into the next one, which is learning on YouTube. It's very hard to navigate, I think, YouTube, especially for beginners, but also intermediates as well. We have this thing where we talk about with our other students who are in their intermediate kind of phase, and what happens with most of those students is that they start out and they're learning on YouTube, and it can kind of get you so far, but the quick fixes and the those types of videos have a shelf life in which you kind of hit this wall in which your progress stops. It stops because you don't have a foundation. You just have been doing the tips and the tricks and the templates, and you don't really have that deep foundation to help you progress past that intermediate plateau. And that will lead into the next one, which is, buy the next plugin, buy the next quick fix, buy this template, buy this MIDI pack. It's going to save your whole thing. There's no plugin that's going to solve your mixes or masters. There's no fancy thing you can buy that's going to do that. Everything that you need to be able to do, you can do with free plugins and stock plugins in your DAW. We do intermediate or advanced webinars with our other students that Jake will do a whole mix with free and DAW plugins front to back, and it sounds top 40 world class. That doesn't mean you can't buy stuff you like to use. And there are some that I bought because I knew enough to know that I really liked them and it did something for me. But you don't know that until you have the foundation. Let's get to the voices of clarity, though. On the opposite side of imposter syndrome is understanding that happiness comes from overcoming and accomplishment. They did a study on this. They found what makes people sad, what makes people depressed, is hedonism. It's like it's a reverse drug type of mentality. It's like watching TV every day. You do that, at first it feels really, really good. And then the next day it feels a little less good. And the next day it feels a little less good. That quick fix, that easy way, that fast food has that immediate bite, but over time it just loses all its luster because it doesn't require anything of us. It doesn't make us happy. It makes us depressed. Overcoming an accomplishment is what makes us happy. When we fight through something, when we figure out that download problem, when we start to break through with the DAW, when we finally wrap our head around EQ and compression, these are going to lead to happiness. And that's what's going to break through and kill that imposter syndrome over time, is just focusing on doing this because it makes us happy. We don't need to be anything for anybody. We just need to create because we want to create. We want to do music because we want to do music, and just be happy in the process and happy with getting to express yourself, and then enjoying the wins along the way. That's how to be happy through all of this stuff. In terms of feeling overwhelmed by technology, we've never had so much resource to learn. Google and YouTube will teach you anything you need to learn about this stuff. A lot of times we just get too worked up, a little too ADD about stuff. We just need to slow down sometimes and learn to ask the right questions. Learn the language of music so that we can Google the right thing or YouTube the right thing, so that we can fix the problem we're having with our DAW. Because guess what? You're going to run into technical stuff. You have to realize if you learn to speak the language, you can Google and YouTube anything to solve all of your problems. And especially being a part of a community like what we've created here, I guarantee there's someone that's going to have the answer to your problem if you post your problem in there. And that's why community is really important. So don't be on an island, and also slow down. You don't need expensive gear. That's another thing that I've talked about. I've talked about how it's not easy, it's hard work, and there is no quick fix. So in terms of mindset, if you stay in that vein, focus on being happy, focus on having fun, focus on music, slowing down, and not getting caught up in feeling like you need all this other stuff, and really focusing on the thing that I'm going to talk about next, which is what do we focus on to really move the needle, to stay out of these kind of rabbit holes and these dark places? What do I need to focus on to do that? Okay. It's actually simpler than you think. When it comes to your way forward, you'll get almost to the end by just focusing on these two things: learning to hear accurately, learning to hear sound accurately, learning to hear frequencies and compression and dynamics accurately in a room that translates it correctly. I mentioned yesterday that rooms and speakers and headphones are all telling a different story. Which is the true one? If you've ever mixed or produced anything and taken out in the car and it sounds terrible, you understand the concept that I'm talking about. It's something in your room is lying to you. Now, we're not going to have the time in this webinar to talk about hearing accurately. We had a webinar for that, actually, that you could have come to. It's something that we do in our other programs. It's beyond the scope of today, though we are going to give you a workaround so that we can get past this, at least temporarily, to continue progressing and work on that one over time, because that's going to take some time and some doing. What we are going to focus on today is the other one, though, which is mastery over fundamental tools and a DAW. Knowing your DAW is really important. I hope you've enjoyed those tutorial videos that we have for each of the DAWs. Knowing your DAW better is a huge part of growing. Once you know your DAW, you understand all the tools and how to pretty much do what you need to do. And when it comes to fundamental tools, you realize there aren't very many of them. You may feel overwhelmed by the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of plugins, and you think it's all these things you have to do. When you really boil it all down, what we're doing is funneling towards simplicity right now. What you really need to ever learn is the power of volume, the power of EQ, the power of compression, and the power of spatial tools, which are like reverb and delay. That's it. If you became a master at these four things, simple tools, the tools that are in your DAW, there's literally 4 or 5 tools that we'll talk about today that we gave you for free. If you mastered those, you're literally almost to the finish line. There's maybe 10 to 15% more learning you need beyond that. Mastery over these things, it's like, I almost think of someone who's like a jujitsu master or karate or something like that. It's always these foundational things that they master really, really well, not some fancy thing that they know how to do. They know how to punch hard. They know how to block. It's like that. And I want to simplify for you. I want to I want to show you the way forward and have you focus on the things that actually matter. In addition to those 4 things, I also threw in reference and measurement tools. They don't directly affect the sound, but they are going to be something that you can use to learn. So including those in fundamental tools makes sense. And we're actually going to show you a reference and measurement tool today that's going to help you in your rooms that may be inaccurate. So
Yeah,
Carl,
one thing is,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, one thing I want to add, because I just see a couple of chats saying like to talk about EQ specifically or to get into the demo. I cannot stress enough how much what Caleb was saying right now will be the thing that gets you to the point where you can actually have a career in this or a life in music. Because if you are only focused on the tools, EQ, compression, you will completely miss the point for the entirety of your production career. All the tools are available to you, which means the only thing that's going to distinguish you from the rest is your mindset. And so this stuff may seem like high level, this may seem like obvious stuff, but you need to internalize this, because when you do reach the plateau that every producer does that we work with, the mindset is the only thing that's going to push you through it. So if you miss that, you're going to set yourself off from the wrong foot from the very start. So I can't stress enough. This is not just fluff. This is the most important stuff for you to internalize.
I mean, I've taught high level mastering engineers for years, guys that have been in the industry 20 or 30 years. Do you think I taught them something special or magical? No, we went back to the basics and we filled in the holes. We tore the walls down of kind of like ways that they had cut corners and things they had missed over the years. We went back to the basics, and that's where we found that last 10-15% they were looking for. It wasn't anything different. It's the fundamental tools. So that should give you hope. That should give you confidence and clarity that it's not this crazy thing. You focus on the right stuff and it can actually become quite simple. It's a lot of work, but it's quite simple. And that's what I want to express to you. So let's start.
Yeah.
First thing I want to get into is EQ. And there's no better place to learn EQ than in mastering. It's the time you hear it the most and understand it the most and see how it affects the overall scope of a song the most. So what I want to do is turn it over to Jake and have him demonstrate this in real time. It's better for you to see it live than for me to talk about it. He's also going to bring in a reference tool. And this is a way that you can work in an imperfect room. So if your speakers, your headphones, your ears aren't quite up to par yet, let's use some measurement tools to make sure we're within the ballpark. That's why we had you download that PAS analyzer. Okay. The PAS analyzer is going to tell you a tail. What we have are 2 examples of the PAS analyzer up on the stream. On the left-hand side is a bad mix. On the right-hand side is a good mix. You can see that they look quite different if you're kind of freaking out about what they look like. All you're seeing is really frequencies in the audible spectrum of the human ear. The peak of, if you look at the right-hand side, the peak of that kind of line there is hitting at about 60 hertz, where a lot of the power of your mixes will be. It's a frequency level down in the low range. It's the bass level. On the PAS analyzer, that should be usually the top of your line, and it should look like kind of a nice diagonal like it does on the right-hand side. Don't worry about the little micro bumps, but generally a nice sloping line down to about 16,000, which is very, very high frequencies. You probably may not even be able to hear them. Now, what we can do is use this to fill in the gaps that we may not be hearing in our room. If we can learn to understand these graphs, and Jake's going to break this down a little bit more today. If we can learn to understand these graphs, we can hear past and see past what's sometimes going on in our rooms that's confusing us. Because any song you pull up in the world is going to look pretty much like the right-hand side. The slope might vary a little bit, but they're all going to look about the same, because that's what balanced frequencies look like. And a bad mix will look like what's on the left-hand side. So we're going to use that today, and this will be a valuable tool for you to learn with. You're going to connect your ears with your eyes, and this is going to help you move forward. It's very cool. Again, this is a closer look at what's going on. There's some important numbers in here that you're going to have to reference back to. Once you get your PAS going, you're going to forget all about what I'm about to say. You're going to want to come and rewatch this video, because there's some important numbers that you need to have in your parameters there on the bottom right-hand side of the PAS analyzer. First off, you want that LF res to be at 10 hertz. It won't default to that. I think it defaults at like 40 hertz or something. You want to set that to 10 hertz. On the very bottom of that same line, there's detect. You're going to set that to RMS. And right beside it, it says response. You're going to want to set that to 400. So 10 RMS and 400. And then it will look like the paths that I have here, and it will give you information about what's going on in your mix. So get ready to use those. Jake's going to do a little bit more with that right now. So we're going to talk about EQ, and we're going to talk about how to read frequencies using a analyzer. That's the goal right now.
Oh,
take over, Jake.
Yeah. Yeah, I do want to take over. What do you think, guys? You want to jump in? Want to jump into the DAW? 23,456 if you're ready to go. Oh, Dave. Finger on the trigger. I'm not seeing any commas here, though, guys. What's going on? There we go. All right, sweet. So you guys got some of the plugins here, right? You guys got some of the free plugins. Hopefully most of you were able to download those without any issues. For those of you who did have issues, keep going at it. We'll ask questions in the community. Do a little bit of digging. Make sure you get those things in. I'm going to show you what each of these kind of look like today. Starting with EQ. This is really about knowing the tools and knowing what they do. And then we're going to apply it to a master. You guys hear that? Hearing that okay? Yep. Cool. Sweet. Sweet. EQ. First, you can use your stock EQ for this. Every sound, every signal has frequency content, right? All EQ is turning up and down frequency content. So a really interesting way, I think, of kind of understanding EQ is to start by thinking of it in kind of like these 4 quadrants, right? Number 1, you can make things duller, like thinner or thicker. You can make things brighter or duller. Okay. I'm just going to demonstrate this real quick. Don't get bogged down with the controls right now. Just think thicker, thinner. Okay, here we go. Notice when I push up these frequencies, it sounds thicker. That kick becomes more powerful. There's more low-end content. It feels more pumpy in your chest, right? You guys want this a little bit bigger? Make this a little bit bigger. Now thinner. Right? Notice when we take down all these kind of lower frequencies in the frequency spectrum, this loop sounds thinner. We start to lose all of that power and that impact from the kick drum. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we have higher frequencies, right? Just a minute. We have higher end of the frequencies, right? So take a listen. We're going to go ahead and make it brighter. All those clicks and clacks kind of coming to life, right? And then let's make it duller. You guys hearing that? You're hearing the differences between those kind of 4 quadrants, right? Brighter, duller, thicker, thinner. Very, very simple way to start thinking about EQ, right? Can I make this sound, does this sound need to be thicker? Does it need to be thinner? Does it need to be brighter? Does it need to be duller, right? And there are frequencies in between, right? So if we just take a bell curve, this is called a bell curve. What we just demonstrated was a shelf, right? So shelves can be boosted or cut. That's a low shelf. And then a high shelf can be boosted or cut. A bell curve can be boosted or cut. You could also make them thinner or thicker. And there are different reasons and different scenarios where you might want to use those. We're not going to dig that deep today. Right now, just understand the potential that these tools have to manipulate audio.
Yeah, good question, Karen.
I'm sorry?
Good question, Karen. A shelf is just one that looks like a shelf as opposed to, looks like a shelf, as opposed to the other one he was just using is called a bell curve because it looks, I don't know, kind of round like a bell.
Yep.
And in addition to bells and shelves, there's one more that people typically use, which is a, what do they call it? A cut.
A filter.
A filter pass.
Filter.
So that's taking everything. So those are the 3 kind of typical EQ curves.
And Logic shows this in a really kind of nice, friendly, user-friendly kind of way, right? Different DAWs are going to have different stock EQs. They're going to be laid out a little bit differently. Some of them might have knobs, but all the parameters are the same. We just prefer using this EQ to teach it because it's very visual. It's very easy to understand, right? Kind of helps you marry your eyes with your ears in a really nice way.
Yeah, the roles are interesting. You'll notice that they're kind of laid out in terms of the roles up on top. On the ends, you have the cuts. So those are when you want to roll off all the highs or all the lows, which you'll do. Sometimes you want to roll off a lot. The next thing you'll often want to do, and that's why they're next in line, is the shelves, where you'll want to raise or lower everything up on the top or bottom. After that, they all become bell curves, though, because what you're typically doing then is dipping out frequencies or adjusting or adding some frequencies in the EQ spectrum that need, like the track has too much of or needs a little bit more of, right? And you'll do those at different times.
Right. That's right. And every sound has, different frequency content, right? So if we were to use maybe, say, this 80s dance synth, use this one. I'm talking about, baby. This is on the frequency spectrum as well. Thinner, brighter, and duller.
You'll find over time is that EQing kind of becomes this puzzle that you're putting together. Like if you're mixing a track, you're having to where all the frequencies are covered at the right amount and nothing is overlapping too much and nothing has too much of a hole. You want it to balance pretty much across the spectrum. And so you're kind of making choices as you look at all the different tracks. Do I want the low frequencies to come from this track? If so, maybe I need to roll them off, which is a term for that bottom kind of hard cut thing, so that they're not in the way, they're not overlapping, they're not building up too much, because that will make it sound muddy. And then when it's played on people's speakers, it won't translate correctly. It'll feel muddy, or it'll feel like it's lost something.
Yep. Exactly. And we're going to get to some practical examples of this in just a moment, right? I know we're just kind of showing and explaining the tools and how they function, what they can do to the audio signal. We're going to get practical on this with a master after this. Check this out. Stick with me, guys. So we've got an acoustic. Same idea, right? Listen to what it does to the sound. Thicker. Thinner. Duller. Brighter. And there are all kinds of frequencies everywhere in between. This is by far the most powerful tool that we have at our disposal to sculpt sound. This is how we sculpt signals, the tone of signals. This is a crucial part of the production process. If you can start by just mastering EQ, you're well ahead of 99% of people out there.
Totally. And just think of it as a game. Again, it's going to turn into a puzzle. You'll see. It's just about making everything balanced. It's not rocket science. It's just learning to hear frequencies. That takes the most time. Once you have that, it's just about balancing everything.
So we showed you a little bit about what EQ can actually do on individual elements, right? How it can, like what it does, basically. What it does, what it kind of sounds like. Let's talk about how to apply that in a mastering context. Here's our song from yesterday.
It's a great question, Praveen. Is there a standard for balance? Totally. And it's not a standard that we've come up with just like out of thin air. It's really a standard based upon what makes music sound good coming out of speakers, because you have to realize that speaker cones are a not an infinite possibility mechanism. They have limitations. For example, if there's too much of one frequency, the speaker cone starts to over vibrate in that frequency and it starts to blur other frequencies, and that's just kind of getting into acoustics. So what we found is the standard is just what makes them come out of the speakers the nicest, so you can have the most definition and hear things. And when we start talking about the paths, you'll see a common theme that we can kind of use, even if you haven't been able to hear all of that yet and you're still playing with that, and that'll take time. But you can kind of see the general curve that I was talking about, and that'll sound balanced when it comes out of speakers. So that's like that's kind of a shortcut.
So what we've been able to do is we know now that we can take a signal and we can affect its frequencies, right? And we know a little bit about how EQ can actually do that, and a little bit about what it sounds like on a few individual instruments. Let's just explore this on a master, right? This is a final mix that I've brought in. It's ready for the mastering phase. We're gonna go ahead and just kind of mess with EQ starting with the 4 quadrants that we talked about early on, right? First, thicker. And I'm actually going to just kind of hit this section here.
Plans for this life. Did I ever expect that maybe life is shorter than we realize? Should I believe that you still
Thicker and thinner.
plans for this life? Did I ever expect that maybe life is shorter than we realize? Should I believe that you still love me with that empty look I saw in
And duller.
your eyes?
Brighter. Now, if we go extreme with some of these boosts or some of these cuts, you can start to hear what imbalance actually sounds like.
And this is why, this is why we teach mastering first, because there's no better place that you'll hear it so dramatically as with a full song that has a full sonic spectrum. If you did this on a snare drum, there's not a lot of frequency in there. There's just a little bit of frequency. And so it doesn't make as much sense in terms of EQ, but you can really hear it when it comes to mastering. Those really affected the sound of the song. And anyway, that's part of the method to this madness.
This is exactly why we teach it this way, right? Because it is so apparent when it comes to applying EQ on a full track. Much more so than those individual tracks. Exactly right. Exactly right.
The feelings start to roll.
Let's just swoop a bell curve through there.
And after everything that's happened now, I don't know if I'll be okay. Did I ever expect that maybe life would complicate itself? And is there ever a point in planning when it all just goes to hell?
Not listening for anything specific. I'm just demonstrating what it sounds like to manipulate these frequencies across the frequency spectrum.
Awesome question. Sorry.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
So sorry, Jake. I loved the question from Rue. Does it make more sense to control these elements on the front end with mic placement, distance, or later with EQ? This is the end in mind perspective you start to have when you start looking at the end product. You start to go, because a lot of times people will send me a master, and guess what? I can only make it so much better because of all the mistakes that were made throughout the process. There's only so much I can do. I'm working with a stereo track. They want me to bring it up to this insane volume, but it has muddy, clashing, frequencies and dynamics that are off the chart. There's nothing I can do. I can only turn a Toyota into a Lexus. I can't turn it into a Ferrari. So what you start to learn is all the stuff you can do all through mixing, all through production, even what you're talking about there, the way you record it, that all leads up to that final moment in mastering where you can actually make it sound good. That's exactly the perspective. You're asking the right question. Congratulations, you're getting it.
Yeah, well done. Well done. So, I want to make sure I'm hitting some.
Exactly, Kat.
So let's keep going here. So how do we know, if you don't have your listening environment kind of like dialed in and things like that, how do you know you're getting kind of like a sonic balance? Yes, we can hear when it's kind of imbalanced, but how do you like aggressively imbalanced or exaggeratedly so, right? But how do you actually know? What's a little kind of like shortcut you can use? This is why we had you buy the PAS analyzer. This is why it's so important. If you didn't buy the PAS analyzer from Waves, that's what we use in all of our programs. That's how we teach. There's a free option, Voxengo Span, I think it's called, or you can use any frequency analyzer inside your DAW. For more, we're not going to dig deep on that. But today we're going to use that PAS analyzer, and we're just going to take a look at what this song actually looks like on the graph. This is the same thing that we're seeing with our EQ. These little lines, this meter here, this is showing us frequency content. This PAS analyzer, it's showing us frequency content.
Yep.
How much volume each frequency actually has.
The decades start to roll, and I don't
I can tell some of you are grasping the concept of the PAS here, and frequency analyzers in general. The only thing you need to note is that they all kind of work different. They all look different. What is balanced on each one of them looks a little different. For example, on the PAS, it's that kind of curve. On some of them, it's flat. So you just have to learn the one you pick. If you use Voxengo Span, it's going to look different from PAS. So you just listen to a ton of music through it. You'll start to see a pattern, and you'll know that's kind of generally what you're going for.
That's exactly what we're gonna do right now, Caleb.
Ah,
I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you guys.
yeah. The red line is showing like the overall peaks. Yep.
I'm gonna bring in a few songs here. This one by Story of the Year. Be all rock tracks. I'm gonna put in Kids of Summer from Mayday Parade. I'm gonna bring in Chunk, No Captain Chunk. You ever listen to those guys? Chunk, No Captain Chunk. These are all like modern rock references. It's kind of my wheelhouse. Yeah, absolutely. We'll bring in some I do have hip hop references, but they're all explicit lyrics, so I'm not going to share those on this one today. But I will bring in some pop references, which have a lot of similarities these days.
Mm-hmm.
Hip hop and pop, in terms of like sonic profile, right? In terms of frequency content, it's all, and you're going to notice the similarities across the board. Just stick with me. We're getting there. Check this out. This is cool stuff.
I love this stuff. This is when clarity starts to happen. It's just so much fun. I love this stuff.
This is cool stuff. So I'm gonna do The Middle by Zed, Maren Morris, Gray. You know, this is one of my favorite mixes, I think, of all time. Even, it's I just love it. Let's do Dancing Feet, it's Kygo, DNCE. You know, this is a good one. Ed Sheeran. Let's do Ed Sheeran, Shivers. Do some Uptown Funk. Oh, Bruno Mars, Mark Ronson. All this stuff. Okay. You want to do an EDM track? We'll do one EDM track here. You know, but I don't want you guys to miss the point here. Stick with me. Oh, yeah. I got an AU5 track. This is cool. AU5, Pragmatic. Okay. Don't check this out. We're going to take a look at this PAS analyzer. We're going to observe frequencies on every one of these tracks. And I want you to pay attention to the curve and kind of take a mental note of any kind of patterns you might recognize as we kind of go through and we listen to these tracks. Now, these are all mastered tracks, okay? So you'll notice that the waveforms are quite big compared to our mix. What we're gonna do is just turn the gain down of those tracks.
So it doesn't blast your ears.
Yeah, so I can try to save your eardrums, guys, all right? So let's just kind of go through each one of these tracks, and I want you to look at the frequency analyzer and take mental note of some patterns. Let us know what you're observing. Let us know what you're observing in the chat section here, okay? So I'm going to clear this out, and we're going to start with this Story of the Year track.
Back again, make you cry, and your back's just real life. We didn't fall this far to break. Maybe there's beauty in the pain. You and I are suicide, but that's just real life.
Okay, I'm going to move to the next one. Yeah, and just to clarify, because you guys, it looks like you guys have a few questions. Just to clarify what's going on here, the yellow line is momentary, right? What's happening with the frequencies in the moment, and the orange line is where the frequencies peak, right? So the very highest level that they actually get to. All right.
Sing our favorite songs, the ones that keep reminding us we were the kids of the. Before I break, I thought I could live without you. Now I need to restart again. Things won't go how you planned out, so just.
Seeing any patterns?
You guys seen any patterns so far? Renee, ding ding ding.
Doesn't matter the genre.
Ding ding ding. The slope. Exactly. Notice that just high level, don't get into the weeds too much with like individual little peaks, but 30,000 foot view, they all have the same kind of slope.
Do you see how this could be valuable for you? Because now you have this anchor. It's not guessing anymore. And if your room is inaccurate, especially, think about how valuable that is if there's frequencies you're not hearing. You can kind of learn your room and your headphones a little bit. Be like, I know in this room there's like a dip at 200 hertz and I don't hear it very well. But when I look at the paths, I can see that it's needing some there. You'll hear it. Or if you take it out in the car, then you'll hear it. But this is a way to save that step of the car and just get it right beforehand, right? This helps us a ton. And then we start connecting our eyes with our ears. And that's really valuable in learning.
Absolutely. Let's keep going. I mean, we've done some rock references, some punk rock references, things like that. Let's do the middle.
Why don't you just meet me in the middle? I'm losing my mind just a little. So why don't you just meet me in the middle? In the middle.
What do you notice?
It's a little louder, but other than that, the curve's the same.
Completely different genre. Next.
I wanna dance another beat now, unless it's with you. Tell me.
Crazy. Is anybody else fascinated by it? I'm still fascinated by this, and I've been doing this for over 20 years.
Because they sound so different. You'd think that they would be, but they're not. We've learned as engineers what makes music sound good coming out of speakers, and it's balance. And we're seeing this balance here.
Yep.
I wanna kiss your eyes, I wanna drink that smile, I wanna feel like my soul's on fire.
I wanted to share this song specifically. Can anybody tell me what's different about this song? Just visually, just on this slope here, compared to the other songs we've listened to so far. Anybody?
I wanna stay up all day and all night. Yeah, you got me singing.
Not even paying attention to this portion. Not paying attention to anti-phase, anything like that. Just this in here.
Like, ooh, I love it when you do it like that. And when you're close up, give me the shivers. Oh, baby, you wanna dance till the sunlight cracks. And when they say the party's over, then we'll bring it right back. And we'll say, ooh, I love it when you do it like that.
Brian got it. Brian got it. It's this right here. It's brighter.
Because that is a bright vocal.
That is such a bright vocal. It's such a bright vocal. Now let's, just for comparison, let's go back to any of these other tracks and listen to the vocal and pay attention to what's going on in the 8,000 hertz range.
I wanna dance another beat now, unless it's with you. Tell me, who do I call when I lose my mind? 4 in the morning.
Man, all good intentions. So pull
Still a bright vocal. Overall, the track is louder. So we're gonna turn it down just a touch. Try to get more apples to apples.
pull me closer. Why don't you pull me close? Why don't you come on over?
It's worth the risk, so I don't end up after the other 12 long months until I recover. That's just real life. We didn't fall. That I could love this hard. Ooh, I can get enough.
If you pulled up a Selena Gomez track, it would be similarly bright. For whatever reason, they do her vocals so bright, and Ed Sheeran, they do his vocals so bright. That's kind of like, I don't like it personally. I think it's ear fatiguing, but you know, whatever.
And you'll listen to different mixes within different genres. It's not just pop 2023, Brian. It's different mixers.
Yeah.
Different mixers, it's different styles, it's different artists. It's all across the board. You can go through any pop 2023 playlist and see these little differences in the mix. See these differences in vocal tonality, right? There are other way more pop songs in here that don't have such a bright vocal on them. Another one is Ariana Grande. Really tons of high end, but a little bit less of this, right? Anyway. Similar curve, right? Tons of high-end content here, right? Tons of high-end content, but overall, 30,000 foot view. We're starting up here, and then there's this sloping down.
Yep.
Right.
And there is some conversation to be had here then about referencing. So one of the things we can do, because all those slopes were slightly different, they all look pretty much the same, but you could argue that they're ever so slightly different. Well, if you're doing a mix then or a master, what you can do is pull in a song that is similar to what you're going for. Look at the paths analyzer on both of them, and then once again you have an anchor to shoot for.
100%. So we're going to use this track as our anchor and make a few changes to our mix to bring it closer to our reference track.
So just to make sure everyone's on the same page, what is he about to do? What is this process he's about to do called?
This is EQ.
Well, and what I was going for is mastering. This is mastering a track. At least the EQ part of mastering. Yeah, so you're both right. EQing in mastering.
What's cool is we can put a paths analyzer on each track, the mix that we want to master, and the reference track, and we can compare the curves. Let's do that. I'm gonna just kind of isolate it to the chunkiest part of the song here. Let's listen to the reference. So I can hear the differences, but what's super powerful about this is you can also see the differences, right? What are you seeing?
There's not a lot, to be clear. It's not a lot. It's
not a lot, but there are differences there. What are they? What are you seeing?
Yep, there you go.
Give me some numbers here. You know, more this in the reference, more that in the reference, less this in the reference, less that. 10 to 16. Yeah, you guys are nailing it. You guys are starting to get it here, right? If we take a look here, check it out. Check out the high end, right? We've got a dip here from about 10 to 16. We've got it raised up here. Right? So what I can do, what can I do? What can I do to make get this balanced or within the target? Well, make a little bit of space here. Said there's a deficiency between 10 and 16. Let's boost a little from 10 to 16. See what it does. See what we did there? So we brought that out. Adrian says my life makes more sense.
Yes.
Love that. That's what I'm talking about. Now let's take it away. Let's hear the difference. Right? One move. One move, guys. This is the power of frequencies. This is the power of EQ. Is this turning on some light bulbs? One in the chat. One in the chat if you're getting some golden nuggets here. We're
Boom.
starting to think about frequencies in a different way. Yes. Love it. Love it. I mean, you can just as easily, somebody asked about a shelf,
Yep.
just as easily, a shelf here,
I thought you would.
you know? Let's do it.
It's worth the risk, so I don't enter this sound. Myself, forget it's not stuck again without you.
Still works. Right? Some people like the shelf better. Some people like the bell better.
Love it.
But this is the thing. When you're in that range, so now we're in a range of acceptability, then you can start to make those decisions based on your preference and your taste.
Yeah. Then you
say,
use
"Oh,
your
okay,
ears. You go, what?
both of these like match, get me within the matching frequency curve. Now I can use my ears and I can use my personal taste, right? Do I like the bell better? Do I like the shelf better? Making sense?
And does this song need as much as the other one, right? You can start to hear that. Sometimes it will. And that, in this case, I think it brings it to life. But sometimes you might turn that up and go, for this particular song, I know it's in relation to the other one. It's not, it's now accurate, but this song needs a little bit less. So you turn it down a little bit. And that starts to be the artistic part of it. So you're combining the technical side with the artistic side, which is beautiful.
Yeah. Where else? Where else on this curve? I see one more spot. Anybody? DJ? Got it. Brian got it. Yep. This area right here. Between this 60, 125. 60, 125. Right? I can probably use a little bit more in this area. Maybe even more into kind of this 150-ish, 60 to 150-ish, to kind of pull this up if we want to, right? If we want to. I still think this is in an acceptable range, right? But if we're getting really nitpicky about things here, we can lift this up. We have an opportunity here. We can make a decision. Let's just listen to it. None of this stuff is permanent. We can just do the move and listen to it and see how it feels, see how the music feels. And if it doesn't feel right, we can take it off. hopefully you guys can start to hear a little bit of that impact, that punch, right? Yeah, exactly, DJ. You can feel the kick a little bit more, right? It's a little bit more dynamic. It's a little bit punchier in that low end, like right in the gut, right? I'm gonna flip it on and off so you can hear. Making sense? Hearing it?
Love the punch. It's nice.
Cool. Cool. This is what mastering is. And this is the power of EQ and audio. It's the whole point.
But here's a question for you. Where would the best place to do these EQ moves be? Where is the best place to have it be balanced? Boom. Mix. Or production. Go even further back. Sure.
Recording.
This is the value of learning in reverse. Because now what you could do is, if you saw that as a mastering engineer, you could say to the artist, hey, turn up your cymbals 3 dB in your mix, and turn up your kick drum at 100 to 200, because that's a better place to do it. We were having to do big moves that affected stuff we wanted it to affect, and also maybe some things we didn't want it to affect, right? Overall, it sounded good, but the more control you can have, the better. So to do it in the mix, even better. So on the actual tracks, exactly. But it's the same tool. Whether you're in the mix or whether you're in production or whether you're in the master, it's the same tool. That's why I said the power of just knowing these essential and basic tools, it's the same stuff you're going to use throughout the entire process. The place where you use it is what matters. Are we going back to me?
Back to you.
We
got more on that. We got much more on that, guys. Everybody take a deep breath.
Perfect.
We're gonna dive into part 2.
So
hopefully that turned on some light bulbs. Take that, because you're gonna need to know that moving into this next segment that we're gonna teach you.
Absolutely.
Okay? I'm gonna take it a step further.
So EQ is very powerful. What you'll eventually learn, though, is that it's best for fine-tuning, and that there's a much more powerful tool for balancing the overall frequencies of the track. Anyone know what it is? I'd love to see someone get this. You tell me, Jake, because I can't see the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking.
What's the most powerful tool for balancing the frequencies, the overall frequencies
Someone got it.
of the track?
Someone got it. Renee was the first to get it.
Good job, Renee. Volume.
Get a cookie.
Volume does much more to the overall balance of all the frequencies in your track. Notice when I said just a moment ago, if I was a mastering engineer and I pushed back to the mix engineer to tell them to what? I didn't say EQ the hi-hat or the crash cymbals. I said just turn them up a bit. Because crash cymbals have a certain frequency. What? Are they bassy? Are they mid? No. They're very bright, and exactly that range that we were looking at enhancing. So volume really becomes the 80-20 of mixing and mastering. When we do our intermediate to advanced webinars, we do a whole day where we just mix with volume. That's all we do. And people are amazed how close to a professional sounding song we can make it just with volume. It's the most dangerous weapon you have. It's very simple, but it's very dangerous. When you're thinking about volume, I want you to think about it in 3 ways. Because as we're mix engineers, now we're going to dip into mixing a little bit today. Mixing is just doing mastering on multiple tracks instead of one. You see how they correlate? When you're mixing, though, you're painting a picture in 3 dimensions of space. You have depth, you have width, and you have height. All of these are controlled most by volume. Things that are quieter sound further away. That's just natural. So if you want depth, things that are quieter sound, things that are farther away sound quieter, and things that are louder sound closer. When we talk about width, you'll find that on any of your DAWs, on your volume fader, right above it, is this thing called pan. And pan is volume. Pan is just changing the volume from side to side instead of up and down in the stereo field. So if you turn the knob to the right, you'll hear more volume in the right speaker and less volume in the left speaker. If you turn it to the left, it's the opposite. So you're painting with volume in a stereo field. This way, a nice immersive sound has stuff that's in depth, stuff that's far away and close, has stuff that's wide, and it also has height. And a lot of people don't know that they can control height, and a lot of people don't know how to control it. But it's actually what we were just talking about. The height dimension of this picture that we're painting is actually the overall frequencies of the track. We feel frequencies in different ways, viscerally, as the listener. We actually experience it biologically. Our ears hear it and feel frequencies at different parts of our bodies. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but bass feels very low in our body, or the way that our feet connect to the floor. When something's very warm sounding, and that's a way to describe something that has a lot of mid-range energy in it, we feel it in our heart and our chest region. It's like a warm blanket. And when we experience highs, those bright sounds, we talk about them as air or head voice, right? Or treble, and it's all up here. And we experience things in different parts of our body. So with our volume faders, we are controlling the overall frequency pattern. What I like to always visualize is if you put all of your different elements that you have in your song on a frequency pattern, it would look something like this. You have your shakers and your tambourines, your crash cymbals, everything up really high. Maybe there's a high synth that's in the low highs. Vocals sometimes sit in that upper mid to low high level. Guitars, mid synth, snares, and then you have your kick and your bass down in the low end. And what affects this most? It's not your EQ tool. It's your volume faders. And then what happens is that the EQ moves that you have to do are just the fine tuning. It's just the frosting on top of the mix. So we're going to teach you about volume. That's going to teach you a lot, and then mix that with EQ, and you're starting to have a lot of power in controlling sound. It's very, very cool. I forgot to add, I wanted to touch a little bit on compression and a little bit on spatial processing, but I forgot to add the slides, ran out of time. Jake, you'll just show those in the mix today. We're also going to talk in the same way about compression, but that's really a lot easier to show live. It's kind of complicated to talk about. So we'll show you compression and spatial processing as well, which will go and talk about all those 4 things that I discussed earlier: volume, EQ, compression, and spatial processing.
What do you think, guys? Are you ready to dive back in? Do you want to take a quick break? Want to take like a quick bathroom break?
Quick
maybe
5?
Refill coffee,
Yep.
something like.
Seems like a good time for a 5-minute break.
Yep, because we're gonna get deep. We're gonna get a little bit more complex with this stuff. So I want everybody to kind of stand up, stretch a little bit, take a little bit of a breath, and then we'll dive back in. Okay.
Perfect.
Cool. Back here in 5. You know what? I'm gonna put up a timer, okay? Just so everybody's on the same page. My favorite timer, as a matter of fact. Somebody got it already. Rich. The Goog. That's right. The Goog. Ready to get this started? Back in 5, guys. 5 guys. What's up? What's up? What's up? How's everybody doing? Everybody good? Everybody good? Yep. Gravy? Yep. One's in chat. Sweet. One's in chat. If you're still with us, still with me, you're learning something and you're having a good time, making friends, cracking jokes, growing, learning, getting better. Cool. Yeah. Sweet. They do. They put nuts in a burger. You never had a peanut butter and jelly burger? They're phenomenal. They're so good. It's so like, it's so weird to wrap your. I remember the first time I heard about it. It was so weird for me to wrap my mind around. And then I ate one, and it was absolutely phenomenal. It's the sweet. I don't know. It's the sweet and salty.
It's like a Monte Cristo in a way.
It's, oh, so good.
Next time you're out here, I got to take you to that burger place. They have a peanut butter burger.
Yeah, you chill with us long enough, you know, you'll learn about audio and you'll learn about food. All right, cool. Let's dive in. Here we are in a mixing session. We're going to take a look at these tracks. What I'm going to do, what I think is super interesting here, anyway, just to illustrate Caleb's point, is bring up this Has Analyzer, and I'm going to bring in these tracks, and I just want you to notice where they sit in the frequency spectrum. Okay? For example, let's start with this acoustic guitar. See what we got here. You can see that we've got a lot of low mid information, but we've also got some high end information here, right? And it's our goal as we kind of bring everything in to get close to that overall curve that we saw before on the master. We're not going to be able to nail it, you know, but we can come close to it, right? That's kind of what we're keeping in mind here. First, I'm going to do it just by instinct. I'm just going to bring in the volume levels of these tracks. And then we'll kind of check the Has Analyzer and see where everything's sitting. Okay. Let's get started. Just going to bring these in, you know, one at a time. I wonder where that shaker sits on the frequency spectrum. Mostly up there, right? A little bit of information down there. Mostly up there.
Probably information you want to get rid of because it's not doing anything for you.
over here and we'll just kind of bring in some of these other elements. Stick with me here, guys. Just observe for now.
Last time I passed through this place, I heard you were in town. I keep pretty quiet now. Word still gets around. Word gets around. Say you crossed the line again. The fire in the wood. Tell the difference from the tree. Even if it could. Word gets around. So many, this chimera crew. Word gets around. Word gets around. My ears to the ground.
So what is this pass analyzer telling us? I mean, yeah, overall we have kind of this slope happening here. All right.
But it's not perfect yet.
Not perfect yet.
What do we have too little of? What do we have too much of?
Much mids. Yep. Yep. You guys nailed it. Too little highs, let's say. Yep. Right in here. Let's say I would take down this stuff. And I would boost up this stuff. Right? And probably boost up the low end a little bit too. So that we have this higher kind of low end happening. And that gradual slope.
So if it was me, the first thing I would do is try to do that with volume. See if I could figure it out. Find out where the too many mids are. Find out where the bass is. Find out where that kind of... Find if there's an instrument between 2 and 5K that we can bring in more of there or something before I ever reach for an EQ.
All right. So what instruments might be living there?
One tell difference from the.
Can we do it with volume? Not guitar. Rings. String. A lot of mid-range information on that bass. Not much we can do there, right? Not with volume anyway. That's when we have to start looking towards EQ, right?
round. My ears to the ground.
Let's see what we can do with this vocal.
What gets around? What gets around? My ears to the ground.
See, we boosted this area on the vocal to allow it to come through. And it's creating more of that curve that we want to see. Is this making sense? It's okay if you don't, if you're not like 100% like getting this stuff, but as long as some kind of light bulbs and light switches are going off here, that's the point. We want to start planting the seed for you here, right?
Yeah, Brian, we can do that. We'll find where we can bring some mids down.
Let's check it out. Yeah, let's see where we can bring some mids down. There's a lot of mid information here, right?
What gets around? What gets around? My ears to the ground. What gets around?
What I'm noticing here is that the vocal is actually contributing a lot to this build-up, this mid-range build-up. Right? So I might just go into the vocal.
What gets around?
And that backup vocal especially too.
What gets around? What gets around? My ears to the ground. What gets around? What gets around?
So I got this backing vocal here.
Around.
Why is that backing vocal there? Why is it there musically? Is it a lead actor or is it a supporting role? Or is it an extra? Well, it's not a lead actor. I think I'm seeing most of you say in the chat section here too, right? Which means we could probably be a little bit more aggressive with the EQ on this one, right? Does it need to be full frequency width, right? Do we need to have all of that frequency content? Are we going to lose much if we pull out and save some of that sonic energy? No, probably not, right?
I'm also thinking ahead, maybe thinking, oh, there might be a chance to do some spatial processing on that. Because right now it's just right in the middle with the vocal. Maybe it's an opportunity where we could delay it or reverb it out wide or something like that. We'll get there though.
Let's cut out some of that mid-range frequency content. See what it does.
What gets around? What gets around?
This part, right?
What gets around?
It seems like this one, if we zoom in, That's the same waveform.
Yeah, it is.
That's the same waveform. So that was a misstep.
Or maybe it was duplicated to do something spatially with it, like I was talking about.
Yeah. Check this one. This little chunk.
Ground.
Right.
Around.
Pull out some of that mid-range content. See if we can cut all the way up here. Let's see what that sounds like. Let's hear it in context. I'm gonna turn it up a little bit. If it's playing a supporting role, does it need to be as far front as the lead vocal?
Remember how before, whenever it would come in, it had this mid-range bump of energy that made the other vocals sound weird. It felt uncomfortable. It started to overwhelm the frequency.
Let's see what it looks like in the Pez. Starting to see a nicer slope here, right? Starting to tame some of that mid-range energy. I'm gonna do one more EQ move, and then we'll move into a few other effects just so you can see how we kind of think about these things. It's gonna be on this bass. Creating some build up as it kind of sweeps through these frequencies here. So check this out. We're gonna have the Paz up here, and then we're gonna EQ the bass. I want you to keep an eye on this area right here. This about 100 to 300-ish. Context? Now that we've taken out all of this sonic energy, we can actually compensate by turning it up a little bit. And actually going to add some low end energy to create more of this curve that we want to see. Maybe more kick drum. Sure.
Getting close.
Starting to slope down, right? Is this making sense? This is kind of, we're using the Paz analyzer and we're using translation and this secret curve, right? to base our mixing decisions. Right? Yeah, Sick Society says need more reps. Absolutely. Absolutely. This is not something that's going to come overnight. It's not something that happens overnight, but with enough practice and enough focused training and attention to the right things, at the right times, this becomes easier and easier and easier.
Yeah, and
until-
y'all get your hands on it and start playing with it and start seeing what happens to the paths in your session. What happens to the sound of everything as you start playing with EQ and volume.
I do want to show you. Is it okay if I move on to a few other tools?
Yeah, I think we get the idea. Everyone get the idea of EQ and volume, how we painted the picture of frequencies.
We're gonna have an assignment and some tracks for you to work with here too.
You
that are
didn't.
very specific to EQ, very specific to frequencies, and using the PAS analyzer. Okay, so watch out for that.
Is there anything we could pan in here just because we didn't really show that?
Absolutely, 100%. Take a look. Even if we just kind of took the vocals out for now. Maybe take the acoustic guitar over a little bit. That shaker is up the middle. You know, we can probably declutter the center of the mix a little bit by panning it over to the left-hand side. Right? Hear the difference there, guys? Between acoustic guitar shaker out versus them being right in the center. So, Brian, that's a very good question. Okay, so bottlenecking the sound is bad. And by bottlenecking, I would assume you mean jamming everything up the center, right? It's not necessarily good or bad, but understanding how the elements play with each other in the mix is really the key, in context with each other, right? So if I were to play these, I mean, if it was just shaker and acoustic guitar, might be okay. But the fact of the matter is, we have 10 other tracks. You know, we have 10 total tracks to work with. What else is sitting in the mix? The bass, this loop, this loop, this loop, the lead vocal, the backing vocal, right? So when too many elements start to occupy the same amount of space, their frequencies start to overlap, and they start to be hard to hear, difficult to hear. You start to smear the sound, right?
Yep. And in a lot of modern music, there's one instrument in particular that usually sits right in the middle and is the focal point of the track. What would that be? Bass you put in the middle, but I'm not talking about bass. The vocal. Yeah, exactly. So when you're talking about clogging up the middle, a lot of times what you're doing is making space for the vocal to be able to have a ton of clarity, and nothing's really competing with it within that space, if that makes sense.
If I were to just solo these elements, let's put the shaker and the acoustic guitar and the vocal all right up the center. See how that sounds. And then I'm going to pan them out to the sides, and I want you to pay attention to what happens with the lead vocal.
What gets us around? What gets us around? My ears to the ground.
So the vocal's not actually, Karen, the vocal's not actually getting louder. We're just clearing out the space for it, so it's clearer and well-defined in the mix, right? That's what people mean when they say it sits well in the mix. And all we had to do was a little bit of panning, right? To make to make way for it.
And the goal ultimately would be to find a kind of a space for everything, all these instruments. And then you start thinking of, okay, what's competing with the guitar over here and what's competing with the shaker over here? Is there a crash cymbal? Finding a space so everything can be heard nicely.
Yeah. Right. And if you're not to the point where you can do that intuitively, you rely on your references. You analyze your references and you listen to a lot of music You analyze that music and you take note. Okay, where are these elements panned in this music in my reference track? And I start to take cues from my references. It's listening to a lot of music. Six Society, don't even think about side chaining right now. Right?
Yeah.
Side chaining is like, you can put that in a box, keep it in the closet until we're like solid on these on the bottom portion of the pyramid.
Yeah. Get 80% of the way there first, and then we'll worry about the little 20% things.
Yeah, dude.
And if you're there, then you're there. And that's cool.
Yep. Cool. That's EQ, guys. That's the power of EQ. You want to fool around with a few other tools just as kind of like a for funsies kind of thing for this mix? I think the big picture items and like the real drivers and like the big points that we wanted to kind of like hammer home here, we've covered, right? These are what your assignments are going to be on. Okay. But
We did add compression to the assignment as well, right? A little compression thing. So we should maybe explain that. I think we added that to the assignment.
I think I'll show it in this. I'm not sure if I actually added it to the assignment.
No, you did.
Oh, did I?
Yeah,
Did I change it?
pretty sure. Who's confused by compression? Let's demystify that for you.
Again, guys, just take a, let me zoom out for a second. We'll take a deep breath. Take a minute. Compression can mess everything up. Yeah. I know a little, always want to learn.
Yeah.
Bacon? Bacon. Yeah, bacon.
Hmm.
Bacon. Cool. How would you guys pan up, down versus left and right? You don't pan up and down. What affects kind of like this feeling of height or up and down is frequencies, right? That's what affects kind of like this feeling of up and down. Low frequencies feel like you feel that lower in your body. High frequencies you feel up here in your head. And if something's really harsh, it'll feel like the dentist is drilling into your back teeth. That's how you know it's imbalanced.
We train our students so, in our flagship program, we train our students so much on frequencies, it starts to kind of mess with them a little bit. They start hearing the hum of the refrigerator and they know exactly which frequency it is.
It's wild.
And it haunts their dreams.
Cool. Everybody,
My pee break was about 6.3 kilohertz. Yes.
nice, Nick. Nice. Everybody ready to dive back in? I'll dive back in. I'll show you a little bit of compression. Okay. I think the best way to teach compression is through limiting.
Yeah, I think you should teach them about compression, limiting, and clipping and show them a little bit of the
teach 'em
difference. Yeah. Show them everything.
We'll get everything. Check this out, guys. So what we're going to talk about is dynamics, right? Dynamics in terms of how to get your hands and your mind kind of wrapped around this in a practical sense is in music when an instrument pops out of the mix abruptly, sounds kind of like it doesn't belong there. kind of catches you off guard and you're like, oh, and you kind of want to turn the volume down a little bit. It's disorienting. It's a little bit distracting, right? And maybe even abrasive. It doesn't sound consistent.
Might be a volume thing, but sometimes it's not.
But sometimes it's not. And these vocals are a perfect example. Let's listen.
Last time I passed through this place.
Pay attention to this vocal. Are we missing anything? Are any words popping out or getting lost in the mix?
Last time I passed through this place.
Exactly. Place.
I heard you were in town. I keep pretty quiet now. Word still gets around.
Do you hear that one word that really stuck out? What was it? Right or quite right now or whatever it was?
Quiet now.
Whatever that word is. I don't know what he's saying.
Quiet now.
Popping up, right? This is inconsistency. Zoom in a little bit here.
You can see it.
Right here.
It's visible and audible.
Right there.
Yeah, exactly, Jerry.
Quiet now.
Seems out of place. Exactly. It pops right out at you.
And when he goes too low, it seems to get a bit lost. Exactly. Yep.
Quiet now.
So what can we do? This is where we use some processing. This is where we use compression to handle those peaks. These are also called transients, right? The initial bursts of energy at the beginning of a sound that peak up like this. You see it all over this vocal. Poof, poof, poof. There's a big one there. Poof, there's a big one there, right? It's in audio. It's part of audio. Look at this acoustic guitar here. Look at all of these transients, all these peaks, right? And if we listen to this acoustic guitar, I'm just going to mute the vocals here for a second. Listen to this. Those slaps, string slaps, right? Poking out, peeking out in the mix. And it doesn't sound too bad right there, but what is it doing when we put the vocal in? Distracts from the vocal. It's obvious and distracting.
Yeah.
Right?
Your ear is drawn away from the vocal. It hears this little click in it, and then we're not telling the story anymore. You've distracted them from what you want them to be listening to right now, which is the vocal.
Right. Exactly. So this actually might be a better example. Check this out. So we're going to use a limiter, and this is one of the free plugins. Use LoudMax limiter to just control those dynamics. A limiter has a ceiling or a threshold and an output volume.
And I'll bet you 5 nickels that not before too long, Jake's going to have a diagram up here. It's going to show you exactly what's going on here with this. He's a master of the diagram for compression.
It's coming. Right? So we can bring down, what's cool about this plugin is we can link these two sliders together so that when you bring down the threshold, the volume output comes down at the same time. Now, when you bring down a threshold, you are telling the limiter to turn down the signal as soon as it meets the threshold. All right, so the signal here, let's say imagine this is like a ceiling. There's a line here, and we can bring down that ceiling on top of these peaks. As soon as the signal hits that ceiling, it'll turn these peaks down. I'm going to dial it in, and then I'm going to show you a really cool way that you can know that this is working. All right, check this out. you can see here that this is turning that signal down by a certain amount of decibels. This is kind of your output meter here. Points 3 decibels, 4 decibels. As soon as it hits the ceiling, it's turning it down by 4 decibels, right? I'm going to bounce this waveform in place. This is a cool wave. Ready? Stick with me. Watch this. See the difference? No peaks. Right? This is the power of these plugins. This is the best way to understand what these plugins and what these processes are actually doing. Especially with dynamics, because it's very visual. We can see the peaks and volume bursts of audio. So when we apply a limiter, all it's doing is turning down the peaks. They limit the amount of signal that's able to go through. That's all it is. Right? All it is. Want to hear comparison? I'm just going to do a with and without. Right here. And I'll do it in solo, and then I'll do it in context. First without. You should notice that those pop, 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 they're not popping out at you as much, right? I'm going to get a little bit more extreme with it.
Yeah, overdo it and you'll hear it even more.
Hear the difference?
It's less dynamic. That's that word you're going to want to understand, dynamic. The one with its off, it sounds dynamic. It sounds, there's a lot of fluctuation between the bass line and the loudest parts. Now it's really smushed.
Yep. This is what it's actually doing. That's why people use words like squash and squish and smush when it comes to dynamics, because they're talking about visually what happens to the waveform. It's smushed down. Look at it. It's squashed. It's more like a sausage and less like a buzzsaw. This is what's happening. Okay? Making sense? You guys still with me? This is a little bit starting to, it starts to get a little bit complicated. But and it's okay if you're not like one-to-one with me here. Just keep observing, keep just soaking it up through osmosis. Right? Especially if this is like your first time, kind of like really diving deep into this stuff, man.
And maybe we should make it really clear. A compressor and a limiter and a clipper are all the same thing. They're just more extreme versions of each other. We can explain that. But
Totally.
they're doing the same thing.
A compressor is just a little bit more of a flexible limiter. It's a more flexible limiter. Some compressors, you just have more control over more parameters than a limiter, right? So, for example, let's take a look at another free plugin, the Dirty LA. Right? This is a very stripped down compressor. Right? Ignore the dirt amount. It's also got a limiter in it, but ignore that, all of that stuff. The only things I really want you to pay attention to is this right here, this peak reduction. This is our threshold. It's called ceiling, threshold, peak reduction. These all mean the same things. Peak reduction is the most aptly named, in my opinion, because what is it doing? It's reducing the peaks. All right. So I want you to listen. We're going to dial this in, and then we'll talk about it.
Instagram.
What do you guys notice here? What do you notice about a compressor? How is this, you know, it's turning down the peaks, yes, but how does it sound maybe different than a limiter? Picking up any kind of like differences here? It's tough. This is a tough one. Oh, it's all on your right ear right now because uses what's called, it turns down the volume based on a ratio, it's called. And what that means practically, without going deep and without going into the science, what it means practically is that it will reduce the peaks, but they will still be allowed to exceed the threshold or the ceiling a little bit, right? And this can be a more subtle way of controlling dynamics. And it can be useful for things that you may not want to tightly control. You still kind of want a little bit of dynamic range, right? Is this making sense? You know, so limiter, exactly. Limiter is like a hard stop. Compressors allow the signal to go beyond the threshold just a little bit.
Yep. And the only difference between a limiter and a clipper is that a limiter actually still lets a little bit through. A clipper actually just chops the transient completely.
Let's take a look.
But limiters and clippers are very, very close.
We're going to use our free clip plugin. Here's free clip. And this is very simple. Again, I want you to ignore everything that's going on here except for the ceiling. Right? So we've talked about threshold, we've talked about peak reduction, we've talked about ceiling. These are just 3 different names for the same exact thing.
They tried to make it confusing.
Instagram.
First, I want you to see what happens when we overuse it. Clipping reduces dynamic range by introducing saturation, right? It will physically clip off the tops of the waveforms to reduce the dynamic range, right? So if you use it too much, that saturation and that distortion is going to be audible, right? It's going to sound like crunchy and gross like that. But if we use it just enough, very subtly, where we're just chopping off the tops of the waveforms, and you can see that here. If I zoom in, you can see these red areas here. That's where the clipper ceiling actually is. I have to squint a little bit. I wish they would enlarge this. But let's bounce it in place. See what it's doing.
Everyone add bounce in place to your to the DAW things you should know how to do.
If we take a look closer at this waveform, see the difference? These dynamics and these loud bursts of energy right here, how they're all high up and they're inconsistent. If we look down here, they never exceed that same level, right? I'm gonna do a little bit more of an exaggerated effect here so you can really get an idea of what's going on. Let's bounce that in place. It's a little bit better example. Just clipping off the waveform. Right at the top here. All right. So I'm gonna give you an image that I want you to sear into your brain. As kind of like a cheat sheet, mental cheat sheet. Okay? In just a minute. I'm gonna bring it up. Check this out. I'm gonna give this to you guys, by the way. I'm just gonna give this image to you. It's a nice little kind of like just graphic.
Yeah, we can throw it in the school.
Go. This is it, right here. You guys see this? One's in chat. One's in chat. See this? Yup. Okay. This is just a very quick visual guide of what's going on with these different tools, okay? You're controlling dynamics, you're controlling dynamic range. If something is popping out of the mix, you can control it using any of these tools. And it's preference-based, totally preference-based, right? And we just saw this inside of the DAW, just demonstrated each of these. But if this makes sense, you know, hopefully this makes sense to you. This is the threshold, right? We've got the original signal, and then we've got, this is what limiting does. It turns the signal down when it reaches the threshold. This is what compression does. It turns the signal down slightly in a different way, right? It's allowed to pass the threshold. And clipping will actually chop the waveform right off.
And I can give you a pretty great answer for when you would want to use each one. Because there's one more thing to understand about all of this. Because we listened to that vocal and we noticed that some parts were sticking out too much and some weren't coming up enough. The other thing that compression does, or the compression type tools do, is you can use them to bring up the bottom without bringing up the top. Because if we're compressing the top down, if we turn up the volume and push it into the ceiling of the compressor, then those notes in his vocal that were getting lost are louder without having the ones that were too loud being too loud. This is compression from both sides. It's bringing the lows up, the quiet parts up, and it's bringing the loud parts down. That's what compression is. And that's when I would use a compressor, because you can feed energy into a compressor. You could bring the lower stuff up, and he can do this with the vocal in just a second. We'll hear it. It'll bring up those low notes, and it'll not let those loud notes be too loud. It'll contain those, and it's compressing everything. So if I want to bring up lows and I want to make something louder or punchier or more audible, then I'm using a compressor. If all I want to do is just tame transients, like everything's pretty good except it just has some rogue transients that are too much, then I use a limiter or a clipper. And I decide between those two if I want to impart a little bit of tone into it. A clipper will give you a little bit more of that distortion, which sometimes I like, maybe on the edge of a snare or something like that. Maybe it gives it a little grit that's nice. Maybe I want that. So I would use a clipper. If not, I use a limiter. And for doing the bottom up and top down, then I use a compressor. Does that make sense to y'all? That's compression. It's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward when you start to see it that way.
Right. Exactly. We're just trying to... That metaphor yesterday was killer. I thought it was a great metaphor. We're just trying to lift the fog. Right? Brilliant.
One person didn't like it. He's gone now.
He's gone.
We have fun.
Okay. We have fun here. Music is fun.
Show him that vocal compressed, and show him how it brings up the bottom stuff and takes down the top stuff. That'll be fun after that.
Yeah, we're almost wrapped up here, guys. Those of you have other commitments and things like that. This one's
Yep.
a little bit long, but we're gonna wrap up here pretty soon.
Yep, you can always watch the replay too. Want to give you as much info as we can, guys. That's what it's all about.
Right. So lead vocal. How kind of choppy this is, or buzzsawy this is, right? For this acoustic guitar, what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to use the limiter to restrict the dynamic. nice and consistent. And then I'm going to use a compressor on the vocal. And again, guys, it's okay if you're not, you know, hand in hand with us here. Just keep watching, keep absorbing, okay?
Sometimes you can use both a limiter and a compressor. Wrap your mind around that. Some rogue transients that are too crazy, chop those off, but then still do the volume up and down compression technique.
Let's use some peak reduction. Let's get this vocal.
Last time I passed through this place, I heard you were in town.
So we're turning down the peaks,
I keep pretty quiet now.
which is shown here on the needle, right? Whenever it's turning down the peaks, this needle moves and tells me this is how much we're turning it down. So on this particular peak,
Quiet now.
we got up to about -2.
Now.
It's turning it down about 2 decibels, right?
What?
What we can do then is
Last time I
we turn down the peaks, we can turn up the entire gain of the track to make it louder.
passed through this place, I heard you were in town. I keep pretty quiet now.
See how it works over here.
The faucet in the wood won't tell the difference from the tree. I heard you were in town.
Now let's turn the compressor off. Tell me if you can hear the difference.
I heard you were in town. The faucet in the wood.
Hear the difference between the verse and the chorus sections in volume, right? Now let's turn the compressor on.
I heard you were in town.
Now the chorus.
The faucet in the wood.
Much more even.
More consistent. More even, more consistent. And if we were to bounce that in place, what would it look like? These waveforms are a little bit bigger. These waveforms are a little bit smaller. Automatically. Consistency.
Now those notes we were losing that were too quiet, we'll hear, and the ones that were too loud won't be sticking out as much. And that's what we want. We want to control it. We don't want anything that distracts the listener away from the story we're trying to tell.
Yeah, and guys, just to be clear, me bouncing these waveforms in place with the processing baked in, it's just a teaching demonstration. I'm doing this to show you exactly what's happening to the waveform. This isn't something that I would normally do in my process, in my workflow process, right? I wouldn't add a compressor and then bounce it in place and then add this plugin and bounce it in place or anything like that. I'm using this feature and this function as a teaching demonstration.
Yep, exactly, right? John. But you definitely can. You should play with this stuff and learn it and see it and connect again your ears with your eyes, which I think can be very valuable.
Exactly. Want to do one more? Want to dive into one more effect before we close up and give you
Yep.
your assignments?
Just really quick.
Just one more effect really quick. You know, I'm trying to move through these things and just give you like we're just trying to give you like the needle movers, the biggest kind of needle movers for these effects, right? The things that are going to make the biggest difference for you moving forward. We're not going to talk about like all the ins and outs here because we have mentorship programs and things like that for that kind of stuff. We go deeper.
It's not effective for it's not effective for a 3-day challenge. We're going to talk about the 80% stuff because that's where we need to be starting off anyway.
Right. We don't have time for that. But take a breath. Take a breath.
Let's play a game. How many cans of empty liquid death tea water do I have on my desk?
6.
4, 6, 3, 2, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 14, 3. A lot of high numbers,
42.
which makes me know. It helps me understand that you all realize that I'm a bit of a degenerate to some level. You already knew that.
Generate.
The answer is 6. You had it, Jake. You nailed it, right? Like instantly.
Worked together too long.
I'm very busy. Yeah. Some of you got 6. There are actually 6 cans of the Grim Leafer iced tea, agave, and vitamins. Yeah.
Amazing.
Sad. It's very sad. It's quite a state. Best flavor?
That's true.
Oh, there's a lot of good ones. I like their tea ones as opposed to their sparkling water ones because I like a good little iced tea. You know, this one's just the plain, but the flavored ones are good too. No. This is good stuff. This is just this is water and only no artificial sweeteners. 30 calories. It's all good for you. Water's for rookies. Got to graduate on from water.
Thing to say.
You guys are great. It's fun hanging out with y'all.
That's funny. Nah, I just do decaf all day. I like the taste. Yes, Karen. If you have GarageBand and you want to get Logic, you will be able to transfer your sessions into Logic. It is forward compatible. Cool. All right, one more effect, guys. We'll do one more. You got one of these. In the Tools of the Trade checklist.
What did we give him?
We got him a couple. In terms of spatial processing, reverb.
Valhalla?
It's a one knob.
Oh.
No, it's a one knob from reverb.com, actually.
Oh, cool.
From Acon Digital. Yep, they partnered together and they came up with this little beauty here.
Marvin, go in the school group. Go to Classroom tab. Go to the continued learning content. And start watching those videos. It'll walk you through all the places to download all this stuff. How can I join in the school group? Do you have that link handy, Jake?
I do, as a matter of fact.
Is
Reverb
everyone in
Solo.
school? You need an invite. Everyone should be in school. It's a place you can communicate and chat. You can rewatch the lessons. It's all free. There's no gimmick. It's just for you
It's
guys.
school. Yep.
Join that.
And then go to the classroom section that'll be in there. Okay. And this is one of the plugins that we link you to. Right. This is Reverb.
Word gets around. They say you crossed the line again. The fire set in the wood won't tell the difference from the trees.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like if you were standing in a cave or something, right? Like sound bounces off of surfaces and creates a very kind of specific result, right? So this plugin is so simple to use. You have a small and bright side here, and then you have a large and dark space over here. On the bottom, you have this slider, dry and wet, right? Dry means no effect whatsoever. Wet means all effect. And then you have all these values in between so that you can blend it to taste in a way that's, pleasing to the ear and is in line with your references.
There's a reason why we're not focusing on the spatial stuff as much, and the reason is because everything else is so much more important. We do reverb last because if you're doing it earlier on, you're covering up problems, you're using it too much. There's so much to do and fix. Your mix should sound really good even without reverb, and then reverb just becomes literally the last millimeter of icing on top that just smooths it all out and gives it a nice sense of space. So it's the last thing we're going to talk about.
And guys, just to answer the question why use Acon Digital Reverb over Silververb, we selected these plugins because for a few different reasons. One, they're very easy to use. Okay, these plugins are boiled down to just the most important controls, right? Most important parameters, right? So we're kind of narrowing the focus with some limitation here in these plugins. Number two, not everybody's using the same DAW. Not everybody will have the same plugins. So we've created this list so that everybody's on the same page and everybody has access to all the same tools and don't get bogged down by the technical differences between DAWs and between different plugins and things like that. Are there some things that are just going to be a little bit different? Yes, absolutely. Like the stock EQ plugin that I was using in Logic, your DAW's EQ is going to look a little bit different than that. And that's okay. All the concepts still translate across the board. But for the majority of these, we wanted you to all have the same stuff, right? So again, that's just not a barrier for you moving forward. If you feel confident with these effects, you can use whatever plugins you want. That's fine, right? But this is largely an effort to keep things really, really simple, eliminate the overwhelm, and just move forward without these technical roadblocks, okay?
Baby steps to the boat.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, I mean, this is pretty simple. We'll just kind of dial this in, and I'm going to do this to taste. I'm just going to do it to a point where I think it sounds good. And it's really not as important, like where we kind of land here. What's most important for me anyway is that you understand these parameters and understand what kind of effect you can create with this plugin, right?
And what gets around? They say you cross the line again.
If I bring the slider all the way over to wet, that means it's completely affected.
The dry
100% affected.
The dry signal is completely gone and replaced just with the reverb signal.
Right. So if we're all the way to the left and dry, you will hear no reverb at all.
The fire in the wood won't tell the difference from the trees.
Right? Makes sense? And then you can blend that. You can blend that in however you like. I like to do this in content.
I heard you were in town. I keep pretty quiet now. Word still gets around. The fire set in the wood.
Go more towards this large and dark side.
Won't tell the difference from the trees.
Ooh, a long decay time.
Even if it could. Word gets around. Word
maybe we do like a shorter reverb on that one. When we go over to this backing vocal, we do a nice long reverb on this one. Right? It's a little bit more obvious. Change that over to stereo.
What gets up is to the ground.
A spooky kind of ghostly effect in the background kind of thing, right? It's all kind of the way I'm thinking about this anyway, just tastefully. We're not going to go too deep into this, but contrast, right? We have a one vocal that's kind of, shorter kind of reverb sound, and it's very, very subtle, right? Exactly. It's like playtime. You're just kind of like experimenting with things, right? And then you've got another backing vocal that's really distant and kind of quieter, but like lots and lots of obvious reverb, right?
Did we give them a delay as well?
We did give them a delay. Yes, we gave you a delay. Let's take a look here.
Anyone know the difference between a delay and a reverb?
Gave you the frequency echo.
Let's hear the difference between a delay and a reverb.
Here we go.
The faucet in the wood. The faucet in the wood won't tell the difference from the trees, even if it could. Word gets around. Word gets around. My ears to the ground.
Right?
The faucet in the wood won't tell the difference from the trees.
It's an echo. It's an echo. That's all it is.
Sounds cool though. Listen in the mix. It actually, the ear likes stuff like this.
The faucet in the wood won't tell the difference from the trees, even if it could. Word gets around. Word gets around. My ears to the ground. The faucet in the wood won't tell the difference from the trees, even if it could.
It's just another creative effect, right? Spatial processing is a little bit more about enhancement, and it's about, like somebody mentioned earlier, playtime, right? And experimenting with some different things to see how you can enhance the mix, right? EQ, compression. We use these tools primarily, and in many cases, the majority of the time, I would say, to fix things and to slot things together, right? It's almost like you have, a fixing mindset and you have an enhancement mindset, right? So those are the effects, guys. This is what you've got now. I'm going to hand it back over to Caleb. He's going to give you your assignments.
Rock and roll. This has been fun. I like this foundational stuff because the further along you get, and after you go through all the phases of thinking that music creation is about all this fancy stuff, you kind of land back and realize that it's just actually all about this stuff. And so it's like preach a little bit. So let's give you guys an opportunity to do this for yourself. Get your hands dirty and just play with this. We're going to have you do both a mix and a master. So what you need to do is go into school and you need to download the master file and then a stem mix file. So I guess we didn't really touch on this because we were going to use the other files, but a lot of times a proper mix session will have like 100 tracks, right? What we did for you is just created groups of each of the main elements. So you'll have like a drums stem, you'll have a synth stem, you'll have a guitars stem, you'll have a vocal stem. It's not all of the tracks, so it's not quite full mixing yet, but it is in concept doing the same thing. It's just a little bit easier way to approach it. So the mix you'll do will be properly termed as a stem mix. It's like you're working on groups, bigger picture stuff. So anyway, download the master, download the mix stems, do a master just like we did today. Start with that. And then it's going to have some, I believe it's just EQ moves, right? There's some EQ moves to do, 2 or 3 probably.
I built in some booby traps.
It has 2 or 3 EQ moves for you to figure out. Based on the paths, based on what you're seeing, based on what you're hearing, do the best you can. And then we have an answer key in there that'll show you exactly what you should have done. And then you can play with that and you can hear what, if you got close, that's awesome. If you were far away, you can see why and hear what it's supposed to sound like. That'll be a lot of fun. And then do the same thing with the stem mix. It's basically like a master. You're just doing it with 5 or 6 tracks as opposed to 1. And then again, we give you an answer key. You can play with all the tools you have, though, any of them that you understand. If you want to try some compression, if you want to try some reverb, go ahead and do that. And just do it. Your first mix maybe of all time. Maybe this is the first time you've done it. Just see what you can make it sound like. Remember, volume is the most powerful, and then EQ, and then compression, things like that. Maybe sprinkle a little reverb on the end for fun. Then, once you do that, hopefully you're feeling great. And tomorrow we're shifting gears, so we need to prep for that. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the creative side a little bit more, producing. So we need y'all to watch a video about how to install Labs, which is a virtual instrument. We'll talk more about what that is tomorrow, but install it. And then download a sample pack. The Labs is free, so that's cool. And then download a sample pack. It's going to be some sounds, and we're going to build some music based on these sample packs and this virtual instrument tomorrow. So it'll be a lot of fun. You'll realize we use the same tools other than the sounds themselves. We're still using compression. We're still using EQ. We're still using reverb. It's all the same stuff, even in production. So that's what we're going to learn about tomorrow. And then make sure to check out the minimum DAW requirements worksheet. There was a day 2 need to know, and then there's a day 3 need to know. Just make sure you know how to do all the stuff for day 3 based upon the videos we gave you yesterday. So that's it. Lots to do, but it should be fun. Let us know if you have any questions. Just post in the school group. There's a lot of people there to help you. It's fun hanging out. Thanks, everybody. You guys are a good group. Really appreciate y'all, and I hope you're getting a lot out of this. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll be a little bit better than we were today, and that's what it's all about. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.